Thank you for joining me today at A Touch of Blue Studio with Drawing with Grandma. Thank you for coming back to view the second half of this painting video. You'll remember we started with a study board, a sketch of the subject I wanted to paint, this owl, and I mentioned that I always do a preliminary drawing before I do a painting. And then I am prepared a little bit better to begin the drawing on my canvas. So I've adjusted the dimensions of the owl a bit, and I added a little bit more of the body and the claw to the image compared to the drawing. So here I have it sketched on my canvas. This is the early stage of the painting, what I call the underpainting, which helps establish the beginnings of the drawing. And I love to consider painting as a drawing stage as well. So I begin to build the construct of the composition, the value structure, where the shadows and light are dominant. And then I went in with my oil pastels and oil paint with linseed oil. And I'm going to lay in a little bit of the background because it helps me to, when I paint the owl, it'll be more natural for me to build the details along the edge of his feathers into the background as I'm working. So I've got the background softened in a little bit for a starter. And now I'm going in with some medium tone of gray to help with some of the areas that are really white on the owl. I want to develop a little shadow of gray near them, and it'll help with a little bit of the interest in the features, and just to take the colors a little bit more to a varied stage. So as I mentioned, I am using oil paint, but I like to draw with the oil pastels right into the painting, and I haven't been doing this very long. I've been oil painting for many years, but I haven't incorporated oil pastel into the drawing stage for very long, and I started it with some students, and I saw some amazing results in our practice and decided that I would go ahead and try to do it more within my own work. So oil pastels are compatible with oil paint, so it's just fun to incorporate more of a drawing stage into it. But of course I'm using a brush to blend all the colors together, and I'm using a lot of neutral colors right now. Grays and browns and deep blue grays, black, and pretty soon I'm going to be using a Mars yellow, which is a very neutral yellow. I'm sorry, not Mars yellow, but Naples yellow. And but right now I'm just using the variations on my palette of grays to kind of develop the drawing. It takes a while to get it correct, and now and then I readjust something. I realize that the eyes are not sized exactly the way I want them to be, so I'm going to go back and adjust them. The ears are needing to be corrected. So as I draw, I just love to make the changes and to develop it as I go. So there are some beautiful grays developing as I'm working them into the blacks and the deep browns, and blending them and creating a lot of shades of gray, which are really beautiful. I don't want to cover my underpainting completely because that reddish brown is a beautiful addition to the neutral colors that I see in this owl. So I want to keep some of that visible, especially on the left side where there's a lot of shadow and but you know, I'm going to cover quite a bit of it, but I would love to maintain some of that underpainting of that gorgeous burnt sienna. I am using only one brush for this whole painting. It's a really perfect brush for this kind of wet on wet study. And let's see if I can do it without going to any small or large brushes. Here I'm developing this foot. It's got a lot of really white hair on the edge where the light is hitting stronger, so I'm gonna have to shape that with some grays in a moment and to create some nice blue shadows under his wing and into that lower left area where there's cast shadow on the branch. It's important to figure out where the light is hitting the least on that branch, and it's right under him, and then there's a light area at the very bottom, so that helps to give it a three-dimensional form and to make the shadow looks a little bit more natural. Okay, I'm going to shape him up a little bit. You can see that eye on the right is still not correct, and I think what I did is I made it too wide. There's a little bit more of a curve to it, and I'm going to go in with that in a moment and correct that eye. And I think the pupil is a little bit too big on the left eye, so those things will be adjusted in a few minutes. I want to stick to the very warm gray that I have on my brush right now, and it's close to white, but it's not quite. And I need to be sure his little mask is symmetrical. It gives that illusion of a real correct face shape. There's this feathery area in the sun and little hairs that are blowing in the wind, so I want to create that illusion. Okay, so let's fix these eyes and try to create a little bit more of that hair-like feel around his beak and get those eyes in shape. I'm going to take in a little bit more Naples yellow where there's a little variation of color up on his head. Naples yellow is gorgeous and it works so well to give the illusion of real soft light hitting white colors in paintings. There's a little bit of it in the ears. A little bit more texture on that branch. And then you can see that I shaped and formed the claws a little bit and where the light is hitting that hairy white area on his claw area, his paw, whatever you call it, talon. I think there's one little claw. I can't see, it's in the shadow, so I'm going to have to study the photo a little bit better. So I think I'm going to wait until this painting dries, and then I'm going to come back and I can show you a little bit more of how I would approach some detail. I think I've gone as far as I can on a wet surface, and if I just keep adding paint, it'll just blend together and disrupt the under layers. So I'm going to let it dry, and then we will come back with some glazing and some details and be able to finish this guy up. I love working wet on wet, and I think I could do a little bit more, but I think I'd be more successful if I let this dry and come back to it. So I hope you'll join me for the next lesson, where I'm going to spend a few minutes on some major detail with this owl, and we'll try to be as creative as we can be in finishing him up. Welcome back to my studio after a few months away, and thank you for joining me today at A Touch of Blue Studio with Drawing and Painting with Grandma.